mentioned before, it's intended as a draft version. Draft implies it will change. So I can concede I did make changes.
About 3 hours later, you made changes to this note.
That is correct, my lady.
Yes. Now, what is interesting in that letter, that note, it doesn't say that you say, sure, you're telling whoever is going to be the reader of this note, because you live with your wife, you discuss the matter, what your wife recalled. My wife recalls about 4 or 5 shots. That's the wording, you agree?
That is correct, my lady. That is what is written in the document.
Yes. Now let's go to the second document.
That's Exhibit 02.
In Exhibit 02, my lady.
Yes.
And the 03 would be the same in that regard, so we don't have a problem. And that's the one that was sent to Advocate Merritz. Is that right?
My lady, version 3.
Sorry, version 3 was sent.
That is correct, my lady.
Thank you, we'll deal with that. My mistake. So let's go to that same paragraph to see how you changed it. It's the second last paragraph at page 1. Can you read it to the court?
I did not count the number of shots that were fired, but my wife recalls 4 or 5 shots.
What caused you to change, but my wife recalls about 4 or 5 shots? My wife recalls 4 or 5 shots. What caused that?
My lady, as I've explained earlier, it's the nature of how I do my work. I will even draft a single paragraph email, leave it, come back to it, revisit it. English is not my first language, so I try and improve let's call it the quality of the language that I write. I have a high regard for Advocate Nikki Maritz, and he's a well-learned individual, intelligent person, so I want to be proud of the work or the version that I give him, and it's with that. So that's the reason why I worked through a couple of versions of drafts of this set of notes.
So you wanted to make sure that it's correct.
I wanted to make sure that the facts are accurate, my lady, or as I recalled it,
Yes.
and that it's in a proper English
Yes.
grammar, I suppose.
Yes, it is proper. I can tell you it is proper if you read through the whole document. Let's go to version 3, 03, the same sentence. That's now the one that's been sent to Advocate Maritz, and it could only because you're satisfied that you've done now changes, again changes, and it can go out. Read the second last paragraph.
I did not count the number of shots that were fired, but my wife recalls 4 or 5 shots.
Now, Mr. Johnson, what happened? You sent this document to Advocate Maritz, and what was the reason for that?
My lady, as I explained in the initial, I think in my initial testimony, or whenever I referred to it the first time, we did not want to get involved in this matter. We realized right from the start that it would be a highly public affair. We are very private people. I knew if we went to the Boschko police station to make a statement, that it would be, well, my assumption was, and my fear was, that it could leak and our names could become public. So we wanted to find a discrete way, or let's call it a channel, of making our version, or my version and my wife's version, what we had witnessed together at our house that evening, available. And I recall, in my initial conversation with Advocate Maritz, I made a note of a timeline. If I can verify it at some stage, I think the first time I spoke to Advocate Maritz was on the 20th of February. So it was during the bail application hearing. I explained to him that we have this, let's call it a dilemma. We heard this event, and we obviously discussed it, my wife and I. It was, like I said, it was a very traumatic experience. The thought that you heard the final calls for help of a person before they die is something that it bugged us. It was a traumatizing experience. So we were obviously upset with it, or by it. When I then explained what we had heard, and I'm contacting Mr. or Advocate Maritz to ask advice, and I said to him, we do not want to choose sides, for lack of a better expression. We want to make a statement, make it available to the case, that both parties have a copy of our statements, and decide whether they want to use it or not. He then explained to me that that is not how the legal system works. At that point, we were still doubtful whether we wanted to proceed. As I explained, we did not want to get involved. And so we had a few more conversations, telephonic conversations, Advocate Maritz and I. And he then advised me that we should make notes. Our memories are going to fade, and should we become involved, we have to have notes that we can rely on, which I then did. So I sent these notes, the version 3, I sent it to Advocate Maritz. Advocate Roo, can you perhaps assist with the dates? I think it was on the 6th of March, around 10 to 3, if that's my email details.
Yes, actually the short answer to this is...
Lady, may I please continue?
You're welcome.
So I then forwarded in my version. I think that evening, so the intention of my version, Advocate Maritz said to me he knows Advocate Mel, and he will contact him, and we made it clear to him that we wanted to remain anonymous at that point, and he assured us that he would not mention our names. And so that was why I sent him the notes, as an explanation of my version of the events. I assumed that my wife would send him the same set of notes, her notes. That evening, coincidentally, around 8 o'clock, I recall my wife was in the shower and our perimeter beams triggered, and I knew someone was in our yard. When I looked out the window, I saw 2 very large policemen approaching. They knocked on the door, I opened, and they asked us whether we had heard something on the evening or the early hours of the 14th of February. I was then obliged to tell him the truth, and I said, yes, we did. I invited them in. We waited for my wife to come down from upstairs, and my wife and I sat together and told them what we had heard. Now, as you would imagine, she remembered certain things, I remembered certain things. So we tell a story as a couple who experienced something together, would tell, and you complement each other in terms of how I tell my version, and she would say, but I had this or this or this. So that's why I'm fairly familiar with what she had witnessed and what she had heard. And that was on the 6th of March. So at that point we realized we have now reached the point where we've made an official declaration that we witnessed something, and the police officers advised us that Captain Mike van Aert would contact us to take an official statement, which he then did, and if I recall correctly, we met with him on the 13th of March. And that's my version. It's at that point I did not make it up in my mind that Mr. Oscar Pistorius is guilty. As I said, I felt a moral obligation. I had witnessed events, or this event. I had a version, and I felt morally obliged to present it. And I wanted to present it as a neutral version. When obviously Advocate Maritz advised me that it's not possible, and that put doubt in my mind that I wanted to proceed. So yeah, that's my story.
What was your question? What was the question, Mr. Roux?
I'm going to repeat the question, madam. Mr. Johnson, let me help you in the answer, rather in the question. You gave it to Mr. Maritz because Mr. Maritz told you that he knew Mr. Nell and that he would approach Mr. Nell. Is that not the short answer?
My lady, I think it's appropriate that I gave you the full explanation of why I gave my copy to Advocate Maritz, and also why I chose that channel.
Am I correct in what I put to you? That Mr. Maritz informed you that he knew Mr. Nell and that he would approach Mr. Nell?
That is correct, my lady. That is what Advocate Maritz told me. I just want to emphasize that I requested to remain anonymous in his approach to Advocate Nell. And I want to also inform you that we had no contact with Advocate Nell prior to, even though he was aware of our version, or my version and my wife's version, before the investigating team reached us.
One thing that did come out in this long explanation was that the two policemen came to your house at about 8 o'clock. You said 20 hours.
Approximately, yes, my lady.
We will at the appropriate time with the correct team, maybe the investigating team, deal with further notes. That's not because you say that you don't know. And the times and the coincidence there. That will come out. Let's focus on yours. What I'm putting to you in all fairness, Mr. Johnson, that yesterday you were confident that you could rely on your notes made at the time shortly after the incident. It's only when you realized, that's what I put to you, that that note is really not good for your version and your wife's version on the number of shots, that you had to come up and really consider what to say about it, how to justify that. And that explains your long explanations, not called for, not in response to questions. What do you say to that?
My lady, I dispute that.
Yes, of course. Will you agree, Mr. Johnson, that taking the note as it's there, that version, and if I may get it in version 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to read it to you. That version is different to your evidence in court and to your wife's evidence. In respect of, I did not count the number of shots that were fired, but my wife recalls about 4 or 5 shots, or, in all fairness, second version, but my wife recalls 4 or 5 shots. That's different. That must not be a difficult concession to me.
My lady, I cannot testify on what my wife's version was. I'm not familiar with the content of her statement, and also not familiar with the content of her testimony in court. And I just want to re-emphasize that these were not meant to be used as evidence in court or as an official statement, merely a recollection of my memory of the event.
But you do know what your wife testified about, Mr. Johnson, and I took you there in the transcript. When you said, when my wife testified, she's been an aerobics instructor for close to 20 years, a part-time hobby, so she counts rhythms and numbers. She plays piano up to quite an advanced level, so instinctively she counts if I don't. I don't pay attention to that detail. That's why I could not say there were 4. There were exactly 4 shots. You do know.
My lady, I'd like to repeat, as I explained, that is a conclusion that my wife and I reached very early on, probably in the first days after the incident, when we discussed the matter, before we had made any notes, made any statements. That's why I'm familiar with that version, if you like. And I honestly believe that's the reason why she counted the shots. And I was not able to say exactly how many.
And we'll deal with the appropriate witness. The version of 4 shots by your wife, that version came about after the visit of the 2 police officers to her house.
My lady, I cannot testify on what my wife's version is. She's been in court. I suggest you rely on her version and her testimony. I cannot testify on that.
Mr. Johnson, you spoke about your experience with firearms in your evidence, Chief. What is that experience?
My lady, I own a firearm. It's a 9mm pistol. And
I didn't get the last part.
It's a 9mm pistol.
Mm-hmm.
I've fired a firearm before.
And hearing shots from that distance, about 175, 180 meters, from one house to another house. What's your experience there?
I don't think I have a similar experience to relate to.
That was the first that night, not so.
I beg your pardon?
That was the first experience that night. To hear shots from that distance, more or less, inside one house where you in your house.
My lady, I've heard shots over different distances. I can't give you exact details before, but I can't imagine that a gunshot would sound so much different from 40 meters, 100 meters, 170 meters. It's quite easy to identify.
Well, you can't imagine that it would be so much different. Do you know? Do you know, Mr. Johnson?
I feel confident that I would be able to identify a gunshot, the sound of a gunshot over those distances.
And when I put the exact times to you, and to say that we will demonstrate that the only thing you could have heard were the bashing of the door, did you go and think about it again? And look at the times and work out the times for you? As reference, because you made available, I see you could, your cell phone time record.
My lady, there were a number of questions there.
I'm sorry about that. I apologize. Did you go and consider the time aspect that I put you yesterday in relation to your phone call and Mr. Pistorius' phone call to Mr. Standard and the noise that you heard, what you called shots? Did you go and think about it again?
My lady, I did think about it, yes.
And?
Can Advocate Root perhaps...
Well, if you think about something, that you come up with some answer in your mind?
may I ask an answer to exactly what?
Any answer to say, well, it cannot be, it can be, it must be, it may not be. If you consider it certain, you get to some conclusion. Yo, that's possible, that's impossible, that you go through that process, if you consider it.
The question is extremely vague. I'm not sure how to answer it.
I'm so sorry. Let me rephrase that.
Yes.
When you considered the time period when I spoke about why
maybe
it
you
must
should
have
be,
been.
Mr. Roo, I suggest you be more specific.
Thank you.
Just to jog his
I'll do
memory.
that, my lady.
Yes.
Thank you. You said, let me take it step by step. My apologies, Mr. Johnson. You said that you considered the time periods that I put to you about when you made the call and when I told you Mr. Pistorius made the call to Mr. Stander. To work out the events, what it must have been that you heard. Do you remember that? Does it make sense what I put to you?
I recall that there was discussions around that yesterday.
Did you consider it last night?
Consider is, I'm not sure exactly what Advocate Roo is referring to. I did think about it.
Did you think about it? Did you come up with any answer in your own mind?
Can you perhaps verify, is there
You
something?
say, for instance, oh, that's what they put to me, and why they say it must have been a cricket bat. It must be possible, or no, it's impossible for the following reasons. Did you go through that thought process?
Milady, may I request that Advocate Roo please remind me of what he put to me, what he stated to me yesterday with reference to the cricket bat?
Let me put it from the other side. What did you think about in relation to that, so that I can understand your thinking? When you say you did think about it, what did you think about in relation to the times and the events?
Sure. There was a reference made to a time of, I think, 3:16. As that's the time that I made the call. I'm unsure, and I must also mention that the call lasted 58 seconds, according to the cell phone records. I'm not sure if the 3:16 refers to the start of the call or the end of the phone call. Can you perhaps just clarify that?
It was your evidence, it's in your statement. It doesn't matter, I put to you. It doesn't matter.
My lady, I think
1.5 to 2 minutes would make no difference.
it's a substantial duration of time, a minute.
Yes, what did you think when you thought about it last night? Share that with the court. How did you work it out, or if you worked out anything?
My lady, I just revisited the proceedings in my mind of what happened in court yesterday. And those are my analytical thoughts that I had around the times. I'm uncertain as to whether it's the start of the call. If it's the start of the phone call, then it means the phone call ended at 3:17 or 3:16, 58 seconds. According to my notes, and I can't recall exactly what is in my statement, I say I rushed outside to the balcony after I ended the phone call and again heard a woman screaming. Moments after I got out on the balcony, I heard the shots and a woman screaming while the shots were being fired. So if you consider that I was standing at the foot of the bed, which is approximately 8 to 10 meters away from the balcony, I'm a tall person, I have long strides. It wouldn't take me very long after I ended the phone call to get myself onto the balcony. So if you're referring to 3 minutes, 3 or 5 seconds to get to the balcony it's quite insignificant. And then I refer to moments after I got out on the balcony, I heard shots. So very soon after I got onto the balcony. So that must be very close to 3:16 if that was the end of the phone call, or 3:17 if that was the end of the phone call. Moments after I got onto the balcony, I heard the shots. I don't know how to quantify moments. What I'm trying to relay is that it's a short duration.
Yes, I agree with that. It was 3:17. It could be 3:17:10, 3:17:20, 3:17:15. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So my lady, that's the sort of line of thinking that I had after the court proceedings yesterday.
And
I'm not sure if that answered Mr. Roo's question.
And that's what I put to you yesterday. Then, 2.5 minutes later, a phone call was made to Mr. Stander.
I have to accept that as true. I don't know.
and what I put to you, and the evidence will show, that coincides absolutely that what you heard must have been the breaking down of the door.
My lady, can I...
We'll bring the evidence.
May I please just confirm that... I did make mention to it yesterday. I just want to confirm that my understanding is correct. The 316 that we are referring to, it's a quite important reference in the chronological order of my version. Is that taken from a similar time source as the 319 that Advocate Brew is referring to, or is it taken from my cell phone's time?
Let's just accept for the moment that the state and the defense will debate on accuracy. I was simply working on the time that you confidently put in your statement, confirmed by your wife, 316, and you attached a statement of your phone call, 316 with a call 58 seconds. Now whether it's 316 and whether there's a 10-second difference, it's not important in the context of the time period. That's why I was asking you that. I'm trying to understand your debate as if you want to say it's incorrect what I put to you. It could not have been the cricket bat hitting the door, apart from your hearing of the sound.
My lady, with specific reference to the sound that I heard, and to restate that I'm convinced I heard gunshots. Having thought about Mr. Roos' statement, I'm not sure exactly how the cricket bat was handled. But let's assume it was handled like an axe when you're chopping wood and you strike the object. The time it takes to reload your backswing and strike again requires more time than the rapid succession of shots that I heard from the gun. Therefore, it's difficult for me to accept Mr. Roos' version of that I heard that it was the cricket bat striking the door. I also believe that a cricket bat striking a door, which is a large object, would make a different sound, not a sharp sound like a gunshot.
You've never heard a cricket bat striking a Naranti door with such force that it broke the door, have you?
That is correct, my lady. I have never heard that.
You also have never heard a shots fired from that distance of 170 meters within one house when you're inside your house.
My lady, I wish to remind the court that I was outside on the balcony when I heard the shots.
Yes.
Also consider that I had been outside before, went back inside, spoke to another person, 2 people on the telephone, went back outside with a lot of adrenaline and emotions in my body. I would imagine my senses were quite sharp and acute. Therefore, I am confident that I was wide awake, and that I can confidently say I'm convinced I heard gunshots.
So let us look at your sharp and acute senses, standing on the balcony, and let us read your note. I did not count the number of shots that were fired. Is that a reflection of your acute and sharp senses, inspired or assisted by adrenaline?
My lady, may I ask what sense a person uses to count?
Yes.
I would imagine a sense is hear, smell, touch, taste. I don't use any of those to count.
Yes, Mr. Johnson. You said yesterday that you could not remember before the shooting for how long the screaming was that you had, whether it was short or longer. You remember that? You had an inability to remember. I can read it to you, but if you don't remember it,
please do. I just want to clarify what you are referring to. Can you read it to me, please, my lady?
Well, let's see what you remember. Can you remember how long before the shots you heard the screaming? Let's start with.
Well, I'm not exactly certain where to start, my lady. I'll take you through the
No,
steps
just that
chronologically.
question. Just to answer that question. Can you remember? That's the question. Not take me through the steps. Can you remember how long before the shot you heard the screaming? That's the question.
My lady, may I refer to my notes as a reference to answer the
Does
Mr. Reeve's
it
question?
mean that you cannot remember, as you said?
My lady, I can remember, but I have these notes available. It's a version that I recorded shortly after the incident, and I would feel comfortable that it's very accurate.
Yes.
So I can provide the court with a version that I put down very shortly after the incident.
You see, two things that I want to put to you. I previously put to you that your notes were accurate and that's what you said. You've just confirmed it, that you're comfortable that they're very accurate. Not so? You've just said it. Contrary to what you later on tried to say. You're comfortable, I repeat, that they're very accurate. That's what you said? Mr. Johnson?
My lady, it's a recollection of my memory that was made soon after the events. So I feel comfortable that they are a very good recollection of my version. If I have to answer the question now without looking at my notes, and I would say I think I've used the term moments after I got onto the balcony, I heard the screams, or the screams continued, and then the shots were fired. So if Mr. Roo is looking for a duration of time, it's moments, it's a short duration of time. I hope that answers your question accurately.
Two things on that. The first one is that I ask you to confirm, and it seems that you have no difficulty. That was a spontaneous answer, that you're very comfortable, that your notes accurately reflect the events. Do you stand by that, or do you withdraw that?
My lady, as I've said, I'm comfortable that these notes reflect my version. Based on the fact that it was taken so short or made so shortly after the event.
Mr. Johnson, I don't want all the time to repeat questions. You used the word very accurately. Do you stand by that, or do you say that's wrong?
My lady, I don't want my previous sentence to be used out of context.
Yes.
But I'm confident that this is accurate and correct.
The second part was...
But I would... Sorry.
Sorry,
Carry on.
please finish. Please finish. There's something
No,
else.
I'm happy.
Are you sure?
We can continue.
The second part is that I ask you how long before the shots, for how long did you hear the screaming? Then you wanted to consult your notes. You remember? My question was, why do you want to consult your notes? Is it because you cannot remember, that you're dependent on your notes, or what is the reason?
I would like to provide accurate information, and these notes were intended to refresh my memory, and I'd like to use them for that purpose.
But of course you would agree with me, if I can remember, I can tell the court what I remember. Can you remember?
Can I remember what?
How long was the screaming before the shots? For what
My lady,
time period?
allow me to just relate the chronological events, and perhaps Mr. Roo will find an answer in that. As I testified before, I got woken up by the screaming shouts, screams of a lady person. I raised my head from the pillow to confirm. When I heard the lady screaming again, I ran out onto the balcony. When I got there, the screaming continued. Excuse me. And the lady shouted help. It was then followed by a male person shouting help. That is when my wife called me back into the bedroom to make the phone call, which I then spent approximately a minute on the phone. After the phone call, I returned to the balcony and heard the lady screaming again, and then the shots started. So Mr. Roux, I hope that answers your question.
I'm sorry to disappoint you now. Let me put to you what you said yesterday. When I ask you the same question, that's why let me rather ask you. When I asked you that same question, your answer was this: my lady, it's a long time ago, I can't recall in exact detail. And when we carried on, you said, all I can offer you is that I heard screaming. You had a difficulty yesterday. All I wanted to know from you is, do you confirm that same difficulty today? And then there was a difficulty to confirm that. And can you explain it?
My lady, I'm not certain if that answer was to exactly the same question.
Yes.
So it's difficult for me to accept that it was answered in, but my answer was in the same context.
Mr. Johnson, you have never met the accused.
No, my lady, I've never met the accused.
You don't know what it sounds like when he's anxious and he screams.
That is a fair statement.
But I assume what you will say, that evening you definitely heard a woman screaming. It could not have been a man. Am I right?
Yes, my lady, I'm confident that I heard a lady scream that evening.
Yes. What is it that caused the inability? When you were standing on a balcony to know the number of what you call shots.
My lady, I'm not sure if I understand Mr. Roux's question.
What is it that made you unable to be in a position when you made your note and today to tell us, knowing that you were standing on the balcony, to tell us about the number of shots that you heard?
My lady, it's a difficult question to answer. All I can offer you is I did not count the shots. I had to estimate, and I know from confirmation from the reports later on that there were 4. And as I've mentioned before, I did not change my version after I got confirmation that there were 4 shots.
Mr. Johnson, insofar as it's necessary, let me put it to you that the screaming that you heard was Mr. Pistorius. What do you say to that?
My lady, as I've testified numerous times, I'm convinced that I heard a lady scream. And it was easy for me to distinguish the lady voice from the male voice because they shouted help in close succession to each other. Therefore, I have difficulty in accepting Mr. Roux's speculation or his version.
Now, mine is not speculation, I put it to you. The second part is the noises that you heard, the noises caused by a cricket bat hitting a door, not gunshots.
My lady, I believe I've given a thorough explanation why I believe that it was gunshots. It relates to the succession of the shots that were fired, that I do not believe you could strike a door so rapidly with a cricket bat. Multiple strikes.
The third point is you agree that at no time that evening did you hear the male voice and the female voice to be at the same time.
My lady, if I can clarify what Mr. Roux is asking, whether I heard the male and the female shouting at exactly the same time?
Yes.
If that is the question, you are correct.
Thank you, my lady. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Lam.
My lady, I indeed have questions. It will take a while. I've received the document now. May we take an early tea adjournment?
Yes.
Lady, I'm so sorry. I was just asked to put another question to the witness.
Yes, please, please.
I apologize, and I was reminded. Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry. Just for the sake of completeness, if your version is correct, Mr. Johnson, the deceased would have been, at the time that you heard the screams, in a locked toilet where the door was locked and the toilet window closed. And what I put to you, that there is no way, forget about it, whether there were houses built in between or not, because you can go to shorter distances, that you can scream, I put it to you, you can scream and get a female to scream in that toilet. You cannot hear it at your house when she's inside the toilet.
Lady, I want to object to the vagueness and the wideness of the question. It's counsel saying that at all times that this witness heard the screams, she was in the toilet. Is that this, or just before the shots or during the shots? That makes a difference. We had shots, we had a telephone call, we had shots. The question is very vague. The question is put, when you heard the screams, she was in the locked toilet. If counsel's proposition that it was at all times when you heard screams, that's fine. I would just like to have that made clear.
Talking about the screams whenever, immediately, shortly before the shots, that's what I'm talking about. On objective facts, if there were shots, on objective facts, there's no dispute there between the state and the defense. The deceased was then in the toilet. The door was locked and the window was closed. And I put it to you that there's no way that even standing on the balconies, even standing closer, that you would have been able to hear screams if it was inside the toilet.
My lady, we live on the edge of Pretoria. We are the very last estate towards the eastern boundary. Directly next to the Silver Stream and Silver Woods estate, there is the Farm Inn. It's like a what do you call it? Like a game reserve, private game reserve. So there's big open spaces, and sound travels extremely far in that area. It's surprising. One of the, let's call it, scars that my wife and I have after witnessing this incident is often we hear jackal calls from the veld in Farm Inn, and it reminds us of the screams that we heard. So it also reminds us how far and how clearly the sound travels in our area. And when it's deathly quiet at 3 o'clock in the morning, I do believe that I heard a lady screaming, and that it is possible for the sound to travel that far.
May I just get some instruction? It is some fact that I didn't know about.
Mentioned before, it's intended as a draft version. Draft implies it will change. So I can concede I did make changes.
About 3 hours later, you made changes to this note.
That is correct, my lady.
Yes. Now, what is interesting in that letter, that note, it doesn't say that you say, sure, you telling whoever is going to be the reader of this note, because you live with your wife, you discuss the matter, what your wife recalled. My wife recalls about 4 or 5 shots. That's the wording, you agree?
That is correct, my lady. That is what is written in the document.
Yes. Now let's go to the second document. What happened? You sent this document to Advocate Maritz. And what was the reason for that?
My lady, as I explained in the initial, I think in my initial testimony, or whenever I referred to it the first time, we did not want to get involved in this matter. We realized right from the start that it would be a highly public affair. We are very private people. I knew if we went to the Boschkop police station to make a statement, that it would...
That's Exhibit 02.
It's Exhibit 02, my lady.
Yes.
And the 03 would be the same in that regard, so we don't have a problem. And that's the one that was sent to Advocate Maritz. Is that right?
My lady, version 3...
Sorry, version 3 was sent.
That is correct, my lady.
Thank you, we'll deal with that. My mistake. So let's go to that same paragraph to see how you changed it. It's the second last paragraph at page 1. Can you read it to the court?
I did not count the number of shots that were fired, but my wife recalls 4 or 5 shots.
What caused you to change, but my wife make sure that it's correct?
I wanted to make sure that the facts are accurate, my lady, or as I recalled it,
Yes.
and that it's in a proper English
Yes.
grammar, I suppose.
Yes, it is proper. I can tell you it is proper if you read through the whole document. Let's go to version 3, 03, the same sentence. That's now the one that's being sent to Advocate Maritz, and it could only be because you're satisfied that you've done now changes, again changes, and it can go on. Read the second last paragraph.
I did not count the number of shots that were fired, but my wife recalls 4 or 5 shots.
Now, Mr. Johnson recalls about 4 or 5 shots. My wife recalls 4 or 5 shots. What caused that?
My lady, as I've explained earlier, it's the nature of how I do my work. I will even draft a single paragraph email, leave it, come back to it, revisit it. English is not my first language, so I try and improve let's call it the quality of the language that I write. I have a high regard for Advocate Nicky Maritz, and he's a well-learned individual, intelligent person, so I want to be proud of the work or the version that I give him, and it's that's the reason why I worked through a couple of versions of drafts of this set of notes.
So you wanted to